All right, hi everyone. We are going to go ahead and get started. So before we begin, a few logistical things. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted to the CUAHSI YouTube channel. Secondly, we ask that you use the Q&A functionality to submit questions. I will do my best to get to as many as possible, but we will also have time for questions at the end. Finally, we expect that all involved with CUAHSI Cyber Seminar Series uphold the CUAHSI Code of Conduct and promote and maintain a professional, considerate, and respectful collaborative virtual environment. Just to reiterate, this webinar will consist of an introductory overview of CUAHSI's compute services. If you have any questions afterward, feel free to reach out to me or Anthony Castronova, the head of our compute services, and I will provide both of those contacts before we close our session. This webinar is part of an ongoing series that is introductions to our cyber infrastructure. And this compute introduction webinar is offered 3 times a year, and its companion webinar, Introduction to HydroShare, is also offered 3 times a year. So the next Introduction to HydroShare webinar will be the month after next. My name is Clara Cogswell. I have a master's degree in hydrogeology, and I am the community support hydrologist at CUAHSI. Many of you may already be familiar with CUAHSI, but for those of you who are not, it stands for the Consortium of Universities for the Advancement of Hydrologic Sciences, Inc. We are a nonprofit funded in part by the National Science Foundation, and we offer both education and outreach services and data services, and I'll be speaking about our data services today. CUAHSI administers and maintains a variety of data resources for the water community. On our education and outreach side, we offer grants and fellowships, workshops, and trainings. We host the National Water Center Summer Institute. We host cyber seminar series and convene them for the community, and we host CUAHSI Virtual University. On data services side, we have 2 repositories, HydroShare, which is file agnostic, and HIS, which is time series data specific. Our apps in compute, which I'll be talking about today, include MATLAB Online, CUAHSI Jupyter Hub, and with those, we have a well-documented API and a well-documented HydroShare Python client called HS Client, and I will touch on those a bit later. An overview of the information in this session. We will go over what compute services are available and how to access them, how to gain access, and how to use them. We'll go over MATLAB Online and CUAHSI Jupyter Hub and the environments that are available. And we'll go over HS Client and what is possible with HS Client, the Python client, and also using the API. So we will begin with how to gain access to CUAHSI Cloud Computing Services. Anyone in the water community can gain access to our compute environments. Though all of CUAHSI's compute services are free of charge, in order to access them, users need a HydroShare account and need to join a group in HydroShare called CUAHSI Cloud Computing. So we're going to go over the steps of how to do that in the next few slides with some images to help you if you want to follow along. So you'll create a HydroShare, just to say, this is why we require you to create a HydroShare account. This is to prevent bad actors from using our compute services for nefarious purposes. We vet requests to join the CUAHSI Cloud Computing group. So when you request to join, you should enter, a real short explanation. And so we vet each request to join the group, and users caught abusing the system are suspended and their institution is contacted. What this usually looks like is people using our compute services to attempt to mine Bitcoin. That being said, requests are reviewed very quickly to join the group, usually in less than 1 business day. And if you have a class or a workshop that will be using our compute services and you expect, for example, all of your students to need to request to join, you can let us know and we'll make sure that all of those requests are approved in time for your workshop or your class to start. If we catch you mining Bitcoin, we will suspend your account. So, don't do that. So in order to gain access, first you need to go to hydroshare.org, and then you need to create an account. Many of you probably already have accounts. Click sign up now, and the rest of the process will be relatively self-explanatory. We do have a relatively new login and account creation system that allows you to link your org ID to your HydroShare account to maintain one set of credentials. If you have a .edu, .gov, or .org email, your account will be automatically approved for HydroShare. Otherwise, your request to join will be reviewed by CUAHSI staff with a short explanation. And that is once again just to prevent bots from making accounts on our system. So then you will go to the Collaborate tab at the top of HydroShare, and you will type in cloud computing to the free text search bar. And you'll be able to search for CUAHSI Cloud Computing, click in and request to join. Once you've requested to join, a member of our team will promptly review your request to ensure that you're not a bot, or a bad actor, and you will gain access to the system. So please note that if you kind of like enter just kind of a keyboard smash in there, we will reject it. And as I said, if you have a large number of undergraduate students, for example, who are going to request to join the group, just let them know to write in the entry box, I'm using this for a class, for example, and we'll make sure that those are approved promptly so that your students can access the system. Once your request has been approved, you're in, you can access all of CUAHSI's compute services for free. And there are a few ways to navigate to our compute services, and I'll cover them in the next few slides. The first and most simple is to open them from within HydroShare. So in order to launch a compute environment from within HydroShare, simply click the apps header at the top of the page. And this is what that looks like. And you can see, here's our apps page. We have MATLAB, a few different approved apps. For example, sorry, so you can see we have a few different approved apps. Here's MATLAB Online and CUAHSI Jupyter Hub. Or you can go directly to the URL of each service like this. You can either enter matlab.cuahsi.org or jupyterhub.cuahsi.org. You'll authenticate with HydroShare and sign in, and you'll authorize the app, and then it will launch the compute environment for you. So you'll agree to the terms of use, and it will open up your instance of whichever compute environment you're using. So this one is MATLAB Online. To speak a little bit more about our MATLAB Online instance, CUAHSI MATLAB Online is a cloud computing environment that leverages the MATLAB programming language to enable data analysis and research dissemination. And the service is integrated with HydroShare, as you just saw, to provide easy access to data and code that is stored in HydroShare, as well as long-term archival capabilities. It provides a convenient and freely accessible platform for scientific data discovery, collaboration, and reproducibility, while remaining relevant to a wide range of water data users. So it's ideal for teaching science using real-world data and disseminating published research findings. It's a convenient way to access the MATLAB programming language for a broad spectrum of events. For example, if you're teaching a class and you don't have to worry about whether or not all of the university or school provided laptops have a MATLAB license on them, you can have your students access MATLAB Online through our free instance. So what does it mean that MATLAB Online is integrated with HydroShare? MATLAB code stored in HydroShare can be launched directly into MATLAB Online by any user with access to our compute services and the resource in question. So this is a great way to share code for reproducibility, work with collaborators, share code with students, have your data and code reviewed by reviewers for a publication. And this is what that looks like. So I'm just going to launch this into MATLAB Online. This is just an example resource used to show people how to launch MATLAB code into our environment. You can see as a .m file, a few .m files, and I click Open With at the top of the resource, and I select MATLAB Online. I agree to the terms of use, and it will open the data and code in the same directory within MATLAB Online. So you can see you can click into the folder, and there is all of the files that were in the resource that you just saw. So now you can open those and act on them in MATLAB Online, and you have persistent storage within that environment. So if you work on something in MATLAB Online and you exit the environment, when you come back, it'll be there. It's a modest amount of persistent storage, but it is persistent storage, and so you won't have to worry about your files disappearing or your work or your changes disappearing. This will not affect the code that is stored in the resource. It is in your instance of MATLAB Online. Similarly to MATLAB, CUAHSI Jupyter Hub is closely integrated with HydroShare, making it easy to leverage community datasets, collaborate, and disseminate research workflows. This platform also provides all users with a modest amount of persistent disk space to store files, as well as free cloud computing, making it ideal for water science education, data analysis, and research dissemination. So you can be sure, once again, that whatever you were working on in a previous session on CUAHSI Jupyter Hub will be there when you go back to it. It offers servers in Python, R, and RStudio, as well as more that you can see on the side. It is worth noting that we just updated our Python environment to Python version 3.11. That's a pretty recent change, and you can see on the side here. So CUAHSI Jupyter Hub is strong as a pre-configured educational tool, reducing software configuration errors and issues so classes and workshops can focus on science rather than debugging issues. Another area it's strong is testing people's code and replicating work. Notebooks stored in HydroShare can also be launched directly into CUAHSI Jupyter Hub and run by anyone with access to our cloud computing services, given that the resource is also available to them, meaning it's either shared with them or it's public or published. The notebook will open in Jupyter Hub with all of the contents of the resource available, meaning if you store data with your notebook, the data will be available to act on in the same directory as the notebook. Some people ask this, like, are people editing my notebook? The answer is no. People are getting a copy of the work in your resource in their own environment. So if you put code and data on HydroShare and someone launches it and runs it, they're running a copy of that in their own environment. There's nothing they can do to alter the data in your resource or the code in your resource. So our Python, R, and RStudio environments are stable and robust general purpose environments for research and education and for running code that is stored in HydroShare. They're recommended for first-time users and cover a large swath of scientific use cases, and they have many of the essential scientific libraries pre-installed. The remaining environments are the result of ongoing collaborations between CUAHSI and other research teams. So sometimes we're subawardees on a grant where they ask us to stand up a specific instance for a temporary period of time. And that's what the remaining environments usually are. So this is an example of launching a Jupyter Notebook from HydroShare into our computing environments. You can see there's a CSV and a Jupyter Notebook stored in this resource in HydroShare, and I'm going to launch it into CUAHSI Jupyter Hub. I'm going to select the Python environment that I want, and it's going to spin up my instance, and I have like sped up this video for convenience, but it spins up your instance, and then now I have a copy of Tony's code in my own environment, and I can make changes to it, run it, and save those results here in my environment. We will go over virtual environments in just a minute, but you can also create persistent virtual environments within CUAHSI Jupyter Hub. So I've run Tony's code, and it has produced an output over in the file tree over here that will persist outside of my current session. If I created a virtual environment for a specific need or workshop, or just because I needed a virtual environment, it would persist between sessions. And if I wanted to switch environments, say I opened a Python environment, but I wanted to switch to a virtual environment I'd previously made, I could do that here by selecting the new kernel, and my previous environments that I have created will show up here and will be selectable. If I wanted to switch between environments, for example, wanted to switch to an R environment from a Python environment, I would do the following. I would go to File, Hub Control Panel, and click Stop My Server. And then I would be brought back to the original interface to select my new environment. So I'll select R and scroll down and start the server. And then many of these, I would be in an environment with many of the essential R libraries pre-installed, but as you might suspect, you would not necessarily be able to run Python code, even though your files would still appear. So once in an R environment, I could either launch RStudio, or I could simply open a new notebook with an R in an R environment. All right, next we're going to go over HS Client. So I mentioned our Python client several times, and now I'll go over it. HS Client, as you can see, is a Python client for interacting with HydroShare in an object-oriented way. It allows you to do basic operations like creating new resources, retrieving existing resources, deleting resources that you own, and downloading entire resources. You can also do file operations like authenticating, adding files to a resource, searching for files within a resource, and downloading singular or multiple files from a resource. You can also do metadata operations, like editing titles and abstracts, editing subject keywords, and adding and altering spatial and temporal coverage, and adding and removing funding agencies. And I will show you a quick video of what that looks like on my screen over here. So this is a time series data learning module. You can see that the current directory is empty, but in the main library, there is some code and some data, and I have an empty folder for data products. So this is a way that you can do this is my resource. So I'll go to CUAHSI Jupyter Hub, and I'll go to the directory in which I was working. And I want to do some analysis, and I want to save the results of that analysis back to the resource that I was just working in so that that resource is updated. So I'll run this notebook. It's fairly simple. It's really just meant to demonstrate moving files back and forth between the environment and HydroShare using the Python client. I'll give it a second. So it runs the notebook. And you can see here, I'm authenticating with HydroShare saying, yes, this is my resource. I own it and I have the right to push data to it. So now I'm saving this figure, for example, back to my HydroShare resource in the data products folder. And once I've done that, I can go back to my resource, go into data products that was previously empty, and you can see that I've saved both the figure and the CSV back to the resource using the Python client. So this is a way that many people use the Python client to not have to exit their compute environment to update a resource. Our Python client documentation is very robust, and it includes example Jupyter notebooks that walk users through how to do all of the actions listed here in a way that does not necessarily assume pre-existing expertise. And it's a great resource for students just getting started using HydroShare or the Python client. And it's at, and the resources to be able to access the documentation will be in a later slide. Oh, here it is, hydroshare.github.io/HS client. So we also have an API it's a public RESTful web service application programming interface, or API, that has been developed with the intent of enabling many of the functions that are accessible through the web user interface to be done programmatically. And many people prefer to do their work programmatically with HydroShare. And the API follows open API standards and is also documented at hydroshare.org/HS API. Similarly to the Python client, there are infinite ways to use the API to interact with HydroShare. For example, if you want your app or program to offer the option to push results of analysis or modeling to a HydroShare resource, that can be done by integrating your app or software with the HydroShare API. And we've helped people do that in the past. But similarly to the Python client, you can download data from a resource, push data to a resource, programmatically update ongoing data sets, and integrate external apps with HydroShare. For example, if you have a really large ongoing data set and you want to be able to programmatically push, for example, monthly updates to the resource without having to go into HydroShare's interface and manually upload those files, you can use the API to automatically push those updates to HydroShare resources. And we have many people who do that, for years. But if you ever need help using the API, you can always reach out to help@cuahsi.org, and we will help you, with your use case. This is what the API documentation looks like, and it's filled with really helpful examples about how you can use it and how you can execute the various functions of the API. So for resources for getting started in HydroShare, we have the HydroShare Python client, HS client usage examples resource in HydroShare. And that is filled with operations that allow you to make changes to resources in HydroShare. The one that I showed you previously, analyzing air temperature using Jupyter notebooks, this is an example learning resource that is available for anyone to use to learn how to save changes back and forth between HydroShare and CUAHSI Jupyter Hub. And there's also help at hydroshare.org/apps. And that is the HydroShare documentation on utilizing all CUAHSI approved apps. And for an app to be approved in HydroShare, it means that CUAHSI has assurance that that app is being maintained and will remain functional. So both our apps and apps from some of our collaborators that we know are continuously maintained are hosted there. Our basic HS client documentation is at hydroshare.github.io/HS-client. And our API documentation is at hydroshare.org/HS-API. And our GitHub is at github.io/JupyterHub. There are many other resources that are also available to help users navigate CUAHSI Compute Services. Anthony Castronova is the head of CUAHSI Compute Services and can be reached at acastronova@quasi.org, or I can be reached at help@quasi.org or ccogswell@quasi.org. I am available on both of those emails, and I'm sure there are many of you who have emailed help@quasi.org and interacted with me in that capacity. So that is it for the overview of our compute services, and I would now like to take some time to answer any questions that have come up during the presentation. I didn't see any come up while I was talking, but I'm sure that people do have some. Oh, so someone has asked what I mean when I say a resource. So this makes more sense in the context of HydroShare. HydroShare is our file agnostic water data repository, and within HydroShare, a resource is the primary unit of digital content. So the landing page for your data in HydroShare is the resource. So I'm going to go back a few slides, and I'm going to show you like what a resource is. So this is an image of a resource. The resource is analyzing air temperature using Jupyter notebooks. The owner is Tony. It's public. It's been viewed 45 times, and it is what contains the data, and the data is stored and maintained there. So you can see it has an abstract, subject, keywords, and here are the contents. So HydroShare is the data repository, and it talks to our compute environments, and you're able to move back and forth between them and act on data stored in HydroShare. So that's what I mean by a resource. It's the landing page that contains the data and the metadata that is stored within HydroShare. I hope that is useful. And if you want to know more about HydroShare and how to utilize it after 1 month, so the month after next, we will have an introduction to HydroShare webinar as well, which will cover everything about HydroShare. This presentation will be available on the CUAHSI YouTube channel to answer the next question. It will be, so if you go to YouTube, you type in CUAHSI, we have our own dedicated YouTube channel, and you'll be able to see a playlist that is filled with these webinars from the past. So we do make changes to both HydroShare and our compute services. For example, it is new this month that our Python environment is updated to 3.11. So not only do we cover the basic introduction to our compute services in these webinars, but also changes and updates to both of our systems. So there will be differences between old webinars and new webinars like that change. So you can see those all on YouTube. What is the best way to start to learn for someone completely new to CUAHSI apps? This is a good question. I make YouTube videos, short YouTube videos about how to utilize our compute services that are like 2 to 3 minutes long. There's one on the CUAHSI YouTube channel under the compute playlist that is it's a tour of CUAHSI Jupyter Hub and how to use it and how one might get started using it. You can also just go to the apps page. So if you go to the apps page, you can access them, and there's no harm. You can't like mess anything up by moving around in the apps. You can't do anything bad unless you do try to mine Bitcoin. But if you go to this tab, Help, there'll be a whole section for apps that you can read. But if you don't like reading documentation, you can go to the YouTube channel and watch the introduction to our compute environment video. It's not that long. or you can email help@cuahsi.org. I hope that helps. What are the limits on the computational resources for running Jupyter notebooks? So it is not supercomputing by any means. It's pretty lightweight. If you're looking for supercomputing capabilities, you'll probably have to go elsewhere. And it's one of the ways that we keep this free and accessible. But I think that your storage is like 16 gigs. And I would have to check on the CPU and the RAM, but I also believe that's available in the documentation. But it is certainly like not necessarily intended for extreme computational demand. So I hope that helps. It's really good for reproducible workflows and teaching and things like that, but not anything much more extreme. For MATLAB Online, is it possible to install and use other toolboxes or custom tools? Yes, you can install other tools within your MATLAB Online instance of CUAHSI MATLAB Online. I think that Tony's currently doing some work on MATLAB Online, but I think in a general, both in Jupyter Hub and in MATLAB Online, you can install your own tools and libraries. Do you envision HydroShare replacing running analysis on our personal work computers? So HydroShare itself is really so HydroShare, the data repository, is truly like a repository, and it's not version control or anything like that. Data lives there. I do analysis and I work in CUAHSI's environments because I like the fact that I don't have to configure my environment. It's pre-configured. I don't think that we envision it replacing running analysis on personal computers because, as I said, it is not like as robust as if you had an extremely robust like desktop. But it certainly, especially for students who are just getting started and sharing reproducible work or working with collaborators, I think that it's a good space for that. I don't think that our kind of vision, though, is that it replaces your local work. What are the disciplinary boundaries on these compute services? What are the disciplinary boundaries that these compute services are available to? Oceanography is fine. Limnology is fine. Yes, so all of those communities are perfectly, it's perfectly acceptable for you to use our compute services. We have plenty of people who people often ask, actually with HydroShare as well, like what are the boundaries of like water data? And it's pretty broad. If it's related to a water study like snow, oceanography, we have plenty of oceanography data in HydroShare, plenty of snowpack data in HydroShare, limnology as well. So that's fine. You can use it. In other words, when should we use HydroShare and when should we try a different approach for compute? So HydroShare and our compute services are distinct from each other. HydroShare is the repository and our compute services do exist alone. You don't necessarily have to use them in conjunction with HydroShare. You could go directly there and just like start a brand new notebook or do some work. I would say if you're doing like relatively lightweight data analysis, I wouldn't like run an extremely large model in our compute environments, right? Or extremely computationally demanding model in our compute environments. I would do like data analysis, data visualization, and things like that in our compute environments. And anything that you find in HydroShare, like data and code that you find in HydroShare, you can run in our compute environments. So for example, if you were a reviewer for a paper or someone is reviewing your paper, a really common use is that you store the code that would be used to reproduce your results in HydroShare with the corresponding data, and you share that resource with your reviewers via anonymous link sharing, so your reviewers can remain anonymous, and they can execute your code and reproduce your results as a part of your paper review process. It's a really common use case, that and like data analysis and data visualization and running anything you find in HydroShare are all really reasonable uses of the compute services. That and many, many other things. I hope that helps. And as I said, if you ever want to use our compute services to, for example, run a workshop, and you want CUAHSI staff to kind of like be on back-end support, if we know that your workshop is happening, or you want to have all the participants, this is another use case example. If you want all the participants in your workshop, say you have a kind of a dispersed audience and the workshop is happening kind of all over the world, but it's virtual, a really common use case is that you have everyone who's attending the workshop to run some tool that you've developed, sign up for a CUAHSI Compute or a HydroShare account, and then access CUAHSI Cloud Computing. And then you have everyone who's taking part in the workshop working, like you put the data in HydroShare, and then they launch that data and code into the compute environments. And then everyone in your workshop simultaneously has access to and can run that data and code so that you can move through the workshop together, knowing that everyone in the workshop has the correct environmental like configuration to run your code. So we help people with that all the time. It's a pretty common use case. People will develop tools like Python and R tools, and they'll say, I want to host this workshop to teach people how to use it. And I want to create a virtual environment, that has the parameters that I need, and I want all of my participants to be able to access it. And we are able to help you with that. And it's a common use case as well. Another question I often get is it a Linux-based system, and is there capability to run Windows applications? It is a Linux-based system. We've run Windows applications in the past using Wine, but these are very involved and usually need to be configured by CUAHSI. So the answer is it's a Linux-based system. I don't currently see any more questions coming in, so I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.